thank you very much indeed for having me. Great turnout. I feel honoured and intimidated in equal measure. There's no such thing as a free breakfast, and as Farah said, I'm organising a construction industry adventure race, and I now have all of your contact details. So I will be tapping you up for an entry. So today, we're going to talk about will developers and building engineers truly align, and my views on the subject. I hope you have some views, but I would like to share mine. I want to start by talking a little bit about how my brain works. For me, I'm interested in how things work, what makes people tick, and I have an inquisitive nature. I don't think that is unusual for engineers. I think that is a common characteristic of us. And I think that it's something that if you balance that with an interest in people and technical aspects of performance, then I think we can end up in some quite interesting places. So why did I pick this topic? Well, I'm interested in how we communicate aspirations on projects. And then I'm particularly interested in how engineers direct their technical energy into a shared vision. Following on from that, I'm intrigued by how the industry measures performance. I'm not sure that we do very well. And then putting those together, I'm keen on how we can move things forward. So what are my qualifications to talk about the subject? Well, I have some, I'm pleased to say. The ones that I'd like to talk about briefly are Heathrow Terminal 5. And the reason I want to talk about Heathrow Terminal 5 is it's, actually I can see Mike Pearce in the audience, who I work very closely with at Heathrow, so that's nice. We spent a long time thinking about how teams should and could work together. And we sat around in a co-located office with the contractor, with the architect, with the engineers, with the client, and we made joint decisions. And we shared what we wanted to achieve, and we were very, very open. And I think that's a culture which has really driven the way I behave since that time. So moving on from Heathrow Terminal 5, I've spent nearly 10 years now working at Chiswick Park. Chiswick Park, a business park out to the west with Stanhope as the developers and Rogers as the architect, Lendlease as the builders. And it's been such a unique opportunity in our industry to compare performance between developments. So we tend to operate in a world where we do one-off projects. This was the chance to learn from tenants, listen to feedback, and try and improve each time. And that has been something which I'm particularly keen to try and move out into the industry. So my final part of my qualifications are working in the commercial market for a number of years now and spending time trying to absorb what I consider the developers' drivers. It's not something which is often written down, but you do, with a length of service, I think you get a chance to pick up on what those are. So I wanted today to share some of those thoughts. So I come back to my question and I ask myself, what are the current industry norms? Now you'll have your own views on what those norms are, and this is the bit where I might get into trouble. So, what do I think the industry norms are? Well, I think that we're an industry which is in a hurry. And when I say we're in a hurry, I think that we don't spend so much time thinking about what we want to achieve and how we're going to do it. We just rush into projects. Having rushed into projects, we then get on and deliver them, and then we don't seem to spend very much time working about, thinking about how we did. What did we achieve? Were we successful? On top of that, I get confused. So I get confused by the fact that we don't appear to have contracts or commercial arrangements which are outcome driven. And by that I mean we have quite often we have percentage fee arrangements whereby if I work really, really hard and I save the project time, I save the project money, then I might end up getting paid less. Now I don't understand that, it confuses me. So I would like to see a place where we're more aligned on that. Now, having said that we're not particularly commercially aligned, and having said that we rush a little bit too much, I think there are some particularly nice aspects of what we do, where we do get close to alignment. We work in an industry generally with very, very nice people. And those people tend to have high integrity. And we often work in a place where we work with the same people again and again. And that gives us a chance to build up a relationship. And it's really, I think, those relationships which drive performance in our industry, not necessarily the way that we operate projects and the way that we set up commercial arrangements. So I have a proposed approach, and some of my team are here today, and I hope that they would feel that this is not a made-up approach for a presentation at breakfast at Arup. This is something that I believe in, and I think that we do in my team. So I'd like to focus on a number of areas. I talked about understanding the developer. This is absolutely key. But then I think engineers are unique beasts. I'm one of them, and I think that there's a requirement to try and understand what makes us tick. If you do that, then I think you have a better chance of being aligned. But combined with that, I think you can get a lot from people by a question and answer approach, a probing approach. And this is where, if we do that, then I think we have a much better chance of gaining clarity of performance. We must ask questions and we must seek the answers. So going into a bit more detail, thinking about the developer mindset. Now for the engineers in the room, I think this is a slide I'd like you to take away. This has taken me circa 10 years to absorb, but these are the things that I think are consistent developer drivers across projects. They vary in importance, but they do always tend to be there. I rarely see them written down, and I rarely see them shared throughout the whole team. Certain members of the team are aware of these, but they rarely filter through the whole team. So I think it's important to start trying to filter those through the project teams. If we break one of them out and look at attracting tenants, and we ask ourselves how would an engineer interpret attracting tenants, then it could be a number of different things. It could be the sustainability of the project. It could be the floor-to-ceiling height. It could be the location. It could be the quality of materials. There's a lot of different things that the engineer can interpret under that high-level heading project driver. I said I'd talk a little bit about the mindset and approach of an engineer. Now, there's a number of you in the room, so thank you for that. But my belief is that engineers love to solve problems. We like to be asked questions, and we like to go away and play with those questions and come up with our own answers. And if you combine that approach with the project life cycle, so if we talk about planning through to construction and operation at the bottom, and then we talk about a series of questions as we move through, I think you can ask yourself a series of open questions and a series of closed questions. You ask more open questions at the beginning of a process, and you ask more closed questions towards the end. The key is to try and ask the right questions. So what are they? Well, in open questions, I think this is to do with the hows, the whats and the whys. And I would like to share examples from my projects of what those sort of questions are. How can we build less? This is my favourite question. I like being asked it because it's where I believe that I earn my money. I don't believe I earn my money by overcomplicating a design. I believe I earn my money by saying, how we could do this in a different way and you could build less. And if we take Chiswick Park as a very good example of this, and I'm not going to claim credit for this idea because this was done over 15 years ago, but what was fantastic about the initial solution at Chiswick was that they integrated the building design and the landscaping straight away from the start. And what that did is it allowed people to enter at the front of the buildings and servicing to come from the rear of the park. It created a heart to the development, but we focused on everything that was going on below ground. There's no value in what goes on below ground. Nobody sees it, so minimise it. Design out the pile caps, design out the basement, and then once you've designed out the basement and you've got an undercroft, use natural ventilation. Don't pay for additional mechanical ventilation in the basement spaces. So integrate the landscaping to design out scope. How can we add more net area? Key question. Question that the best way to add net area to a development is to make sure everybody working on the project is aware of that question. And everything they're doing, they're focusing on how they can add more net area. If we take Chiswick again as an example, this is one of the latest buildings at Chiswick. We've spent time with Rogers as the architects. We've got to a place where the fire escape stairs are pushed to the external part of the building. The core is refined and refined and refined to try and get the leanest core arrangement possible. The columns are increased in strength between every building that we've been through to try and minimise the area of the columns. Everything is refined at every level to try and maximise the area. And by doing that, a typical floor plate, we got to 88% efficiency, which I'm hoping for some of the developers in the room, you see that that's quite some achievement. How can we deliver this quicker? Every builder in the room wants to know the answer to that question. And why not? It's a perfectly reasonable question. So again, taking Chiswick, I like the phrase appropriate off-site manufacture. So I think our industry quite frequently leans towards prefabrication and suggests it's the answer to everything. But I think when you get to a place where you think about appropriate prefabrication, then you can get some really neat solutions. And by that I mean at Chiswick, one of the things that we have done is that we've precasted all of the columns because they're aspects that they are highly driven by the quality of the product, but also they influence the cycle time, how quickly you put the building up. So we wanted to precast all of those. We wanted to precast the edge beams, and we precasted the edge beams and the slab because that allows us to stress the post-tension slab quicker and get a quicker cycle turnaround on those. But on the cores, we got to a place where we looked at all sorts of different core techniques. We've looked at precast cores, precast concrete, we've looked at steel cores, and actually we've ended up with an in-situ core because it's the right solution for that building. So we haven't just leapt at prefabrication as being the answer to everything. Why will this design attract tenants? Key question. Why are you doing it? Are you actually going to have people who want to come to your development? And I think this is where landscaping is absolutely critical. So one of the things that the park has achieved at Chiswick is a heart. It's a landscaped heart that people enjoy being a part of. And I think it's a great place to be. People like it. They like being there. But interestingly, they haven't stopped at an approach which is just providing nice landscaping. What they've done is to try to create an environment where there are continued events, there's activity, there's enjoyment in the space. People like being there and there's things happening. So the combination of great landscaping and activity has been incredibly successful. What's the legacy? I like asking myself, what am I going to tell my children about the development? I have 3. And the thing I'm probably most proud of, and I'm not supposed to go into too much detail at breakfast at Arup, but I am an engineer and I like it, is our approach to embodied carbon. And one of the things with a post-tension concrete slab is it's great for reducing material. So you use less concrete, you use less reinforcement, and that's fantastic. That means you've got less carbon. However, it tends to have high cement content. And high cement content essentially equates to high embodied carbon. And the reason it has high cement content is because it allows you to get quick cycle time. So it's a program-driven thing. Now, we weren't happy settling for a high cement content slab. So working with Arup at the time, we commissioned 40 different concrete mix tests to be done at Kingston University. We played with lots of different admixtures, and all the time we were trying to find a balance between program time, or setting of the concrete, and what our embodied carbon was. And we got to a place whereby we invented a new mix which had never been used anywhere else in the world. It saved 30% of the embodied carbon of the concrete. But for one building, that's 50 times my lifetime carbon footprint. And I was very proud of that, I was very happy. And I could muck about at home changing my light bulbs, or I could do something like that, and I'm happy to tell my children about that. So closed questions, going into a bit more detail, and I think these are equally as important as the open questions. Can you improve the floor to ceiling by 200 millimetres? I have been asked this question. I've been asked this question on the building which is actually opposite us now, 80 Charlotte Street. I've been asked this question by Derwent London. I thought it was impossible, but we did it. This is the building where we have stitched together an existing clay pot reinforced concrete structure built in the 1950s, the white area that you see up on the screen, with a new build light blue zone. And we've highly integrated the structure and the services. We started out with a floor sandwich in the new area which was circa 700 millimetres deep, including the lighting, which is about 300 mil better than the industry average. But Derwent weren't happy with that. Tom French particularly wasn't happy with that. And he asked us to save another 200 millimetres, which we did. And the reason we did that was we wanted to improve the floor to ceiling. We wanted to help get planning for the development, because if you didn't retain the existing building and make it a viable proposition, then the planning would not have been achieved. And we were focused as a team on the pounds per square foot, the amount of space that we could add. But how did we add the extra, or how did we gain the extra 200 millimetres? Well, if we look at the existing building, this is a stripped out version of a clay pot 1950s, early 60s building. And we cut out all of the clay pots. We cut out the clay pots and we've integrated the lighting and the servicing within that zone. Now, I've not seen that done before, but it's allowed us to lift the services up into that space. That's not the finished product, that is the, that is the work in progress arrangement. And in the new build area, a lot of you will be familiar with a slim floor type construction where you take precast concrete and you combine it with steel and you compress the structure into a very lean sandwich. Well, we took the idea that we gained from the clay pots and opening up the clay pots and the slim floor solution, and we integrated the services as well into that zone. We combined that with a water-cooled soffit, which was only 50 millimetres thick for cooling, and we ended up with a floor sandwich in a commercial development which is 500 millimetres. Now, I believe that is the leanest floor sandwich in the world. It's circa half a metre less than your typical, which you've only therefore got to build 8 storeys of a building and you get an extra floor. This is the kind of solution that I think we should be focused on. This is an image courtesy of Make in terms of what the end product looks like, and we built a mock-up of the space, and remarkably it looks very, very similar. Going into a lot of detail now, and this is a question that I've been recently asked: can you reduce the size of the pile caps? This question was asked by Mr. Paul Gransby of Lend-Lease, and we were working on the international quarter. And the international quarter is 4 million square feet of development out in Stratford. It is of a similar model to Chiswick in that the idea is to continually improve as you move through the buildings. But quite nicely, the construction team is integrated into the project team right from the start. So we've just finished a concept design for the building, and we're being asked if we could make the pile cap smaller, which we have done. And the way we've done that, the standard way of reducing the pile caps would be, yeah, that's no problem, I'll put some more reinforcement in, but we didn't want to do that because we didn't think we'd save any money. But what we did do is we looked at the pile spacing. And by reducing from standard pile spacing of 3 diameters, to 2.5 diameters, we've saved over 300 metres cubed of concrete, and we saved the project about £100,000. Not a huge amount of money, but considerable. But if you roll that out across multiple buildings, it starts to become very, very valuable. So I appreciate the question being asked, and I like to try to answer it. Can you remove the transfer beams? Another recent question I've been asked. This is Television Centre, project that we're doing at the moment with Stanhope, which is the old BBC headquarters. And we started out looking at one of the commercial developments. This is with AHM. And we had a grid. We developed a concept design for the building. And we ended up with varying thicknesses of concrete slab. On top of varying thicknesses of concrete slab, we had transfer structures. Now, I don't really like those for 2 reasons. I don't like the complexity it adds to the building. I don't like the fact that it reduces the floor to ceiling height. So we worked with HMM and we suggested an alternative grid. And by suggesting an alternative grid, We improved the floor ceiling, we reduced the programme, and we saved costs. All good stuff. Lots of nice ticks in the boxes. We got to a place whereby the slide on the left, the image shows areas where we had thickened slab and transfers, and we got to a place with our alternative grid where we only had one transfer left in the building. And I think that's a good example of not being satisfied with what you've got and asking yourself the question. But the reason I put this slide in is because the question was actually asked by a chap called Kieran Thompson, who sits in my team. He didn't wait to be asked, can he improve the grid? He went off and did it. And I think that's fantastic. That's every level of the team focusing on how they can improve the solution. So I do truly believe that engineers offer the most value when you're focused on designing out complexity or scope. And I think it's a very important philosophy to share with you today. So I said I'd talk a little bit about moving the industry forward. I've talked to you about how you can possibly understand the developer and spend more time on this. I've talked a little bit about what makes engineers tick and the questions. I've talked about the importance of probing. I think it's also very important to share the answers from that probing and share that across the industry. And I think that leaves us with an opportunity. And the opportunity that leaves us with, if we combine the openness that I was lucky enough to experience at Terminal 5 with the learning and the desire to continually improve that I was lucky enough to see at Chiswick Park, then I believe engineers and developers can truly align. And what might it look like? I think it looks a little bit like that. I think it looks like delightfully efficient buildings. So thank you very much indeed for listening. It's been my pleasure. And if you have any questions, I'll be delighted to take them. I didn't have any stooges in the audience, so there are no pre-planned questions.
Are there any other steps that we would take to, or what would you rather see to integrate teams more? Because you're only going to get this more if you actually integrate them earlier. So how would you propose going about doing that?
Other steps to integrate teams. Well, co-location can work.
What stage?
I prefer it to be slightly later down the process. To slightly repeat what I was saying up there, I think the biggest emphasis though would be on spending time at the beginning to say what do we all want to achieve and embedding that throughout the whole team and writing that down and evaluating performance against it. And I think it doesn't matter so much where you are as long as everybody's sharing in that vision.
Jeremy, do you think the procurement strategy affects the alignment and getting together of the different teams?
I think it should do, but I've worked in environments where the procurement strategy almost becomes irrelevant. Now I realise that's slightly conflicting with what I said up there, and at Chiswick we've had different commercial arrangements. We've had construction management arrangements, we've had lump sum fixed price with the contractors, but because I think the relationships were in place, I think people behaved in a really good way regardless of what that procurement strategy was. So I think my rambling answer is whatever you do, if you can focus on encouraging the right behaviour, then it will be okay. And if you need your procurement strategy to support that behaviour, then you should focus on that. So Terminal 5, they spent a lot of time focusing on the T5 agreement, partnering agreement, and they used that to drive the behaviour they wanted. And I think they needed to do that because it was a one-off project. Whereas if you have a kind of repeat work arrangement, then you're more likely to encourage the right behaviours regardless of the contract.
A lot of your presentation was geared to above ground construction. I mean, you mentioned Heathrow, but not much of the presentation. Have you got examples where you've applied this in below ground structures? And the reason I say that is I work for London Underground and we're creating stations. So can this philosophy apply underground, and has it been applied underground?
there's better people than me to answer that in Arup. I would say that there's no reason why you can't apply a similar philosophy to below ground. And I hinted at Chiswick that we did focus heavily on the below ground. I talked about pile caps, as below ground at the international quarter. But I think the approach where you set out what you're trying to achieve and you really make sure that the team wants to try and do that, then I think it can apply. I mean, below ground, the drivers will be slightly different, but as long as you communicate what they are and the team really set out and try and achieve them, then I don't see why not. Have we got any rail underground people in the room who want to answer that question? Where's Mike Byrne when you need him? But yes, I think you can make it apply.
So over the kind of the sort of 10 years of Chiswick, do you think the question that we're being asked by developers is changing? And if so, how do you think their requirements on us are changing?
No, I don't think it's changing very much. I think that if the questions are focused around end users and people and how they're going to interact with those buildings, and how that links with your commercial strategy for that building, then I think they're relatively consistent. Okay, what people might desire in a building has changed a little bit. So, people like roof terraces now, and they weren't so keen on them 10 years ago, and you need 400 cycle spaces per user of the building. But essentially, people want good things from the buildings. Thank you very much, everybody.
Very thought-provoking. I was particularly interested in his views on co-location, how as an organisation you can have more effective relationships if you partner, bring everyone together. But also interested in the way that he talked a little bit about how you might incentivise people to collaborate in a more effective way. And I think there's lots to be learnt how we take those facets of his talk forward into other activities. So it's a very interesting talk.
It was great. It was quite liberating, to be honest with you. I found it was interesting when he reiterated the point that you have to ask the same question again and again. So as someone that's relatively new to the construction sector without an engineering background, I understood and related exactly to what he said as an outsider to this industry. So yeah, spot on.
It was good, it was informal, it was on point. I mean, it's stuff that we all think about. I come from a contracting background, and at the end of the day, what it came down to for me was value engineering, VE, and I think he steps on a lot of points that we, as a contractor, we think in day in, day out. But Arup have got the chance to get on board with developers far sooner than the conventional way of a contractor getting involved in a development. And it's that value engineering at an early point, almost at concept stages, that will really make the difference. And I think it was a very good showcase of what Arup might be able to do for a development. And we all know Arup are good engineers. And it's a good speech. It was a good talk and an impressive guy.
I thought it was really insightful. I thought it was a great talk, actually, a good breakfast talk, because it did cover lots of sort of intellectual points, which I think is probably sometimes sort of very rarely talked about. It's less about the actual end product, as it were, the design, and it's actually more about the thinking, the process. And I suppose I've had the privilege of working with Jeremy over the last 10 years, both previously at Stanhope on Chiswick Park and more recently at Derwent. And both projects, both companies were mentioned, and the process that evolved, I suppose, through those 10 years has been a really interesting one. And it's really, Jeremy, so the way he works, the way he thinks, he kind of gets under the skin of not only engineering but design and architecture, and actually talking about things beyond just straight engineering, and that's really good. That's Jeremy and the way he thinks and the way he works. That's the kind of people we want to work with, effectively, because having that kind of thinking as part of the team is invaluable, because you're asking the right questions at the right time, sometimes the wrong questions at the wrong time, but actually, as long as those questions are being asked, and we're continuously kind of pushing and asking similar questions and testing and pushing the team, and that's when you get something out of the ordinary, something special. So, great.